Before we get started with today's show, you know Ariel Helwani. You see him everywhere on ESPN. He's a really good MMA journalist, and he's got a great MMA podcast called Ariel Helwani's MMA Show. Some episodes he co-hosts with Daniel Cormier, one of the top 5 fighters in the sport. It's like me co-hosting a podcast with Russell Wilson. It just doesn't happen. Other times, he talks to not only the likes of Conor McGregor, but also people like The Rock, Kristaps Porzingis, and Shaq. It's a great listen several times a week, every week. Ariel Helwani's MMA Show. Check it out wherever you get your podcast. Also, I want to talk about the Right Time Book Club a little bit so that everybody's up on it. We'll be going through April of 1991 of the Jordan Rules by Sam Smith on Thursday with my man Vinny Goodwill of Yahoo Sports. So make sure you've read up. He's got thoughts on Isiah Rodman and the battles with the Bulls. He's from Detroit. We're going to discuss episodes 3 and 4 of The Last Dance here in a sec, but remember, the series continues this Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. As Jordan's fame soared to unparalleled levels in the early 90s with consecutive NBA titles and a starring role on the Dream Team, his image as Air Jordan made him a cultural icon. Yet, with extraordinary fame came extraordinary scrutiny, and in 1993, it all came to a head with the Bulls' pursuit of a third straight title shadowed by questions about Jordan's gambling. Episodes 5 and 6 of The Last Dance premiere this Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. If you don't have access to ESPN, go to ESPNinstantaccess.com to sign up today, or listen to the Wrap-Up podcast hosted by Jalen and Jacoby immediately following the broadcast. Our coverage of The Last Dance is brought to you by State Farm. When you want the real deal, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Coverage is also brought to you by AT&T. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Right Time. My name is Bomani Jones. Thanks for listening wherever you get your podcast. Rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. You only give us 4 stars. I'm inclined to believe you are a hater. Coming up on this episode of The Right Time, we're going to talk to my man Brian Koppelman, co-creator of Billions. Season 5 starts on May the 3rd at 9 Eastern. We're going to talk to him about that and a little bit about, well, you know, the thing we're going to talk about first. All right, got through episodes 3 and 4 of The Last Dance. Now, Gabe, you are too young to really have, like, opinions when it comes to, like, the Pistons and the Bad Boys and all of that stuff, right? And Isiah.
Too young to have credible opinions.
Less about opinions. I'm curious about this part. When you think of Isiah Thomas, I'm guessing you primarily think of him as someone who works in the front office and isn't that good at it.
Yeah, I mean, but you certainly, like, you can attach people to an image, right, or to a story or to a feeling. And with Isiah, I've always just attached him to that Bad Boys team. And there's a coolness that comes with that.
Got it. I feel like there's certain NBA players that have a real had to be there component to them, right? Like you can, like, pulling up their stats is not going to explain to you what this was, right? Like you kind of had to be there. Some people avoid the had to be there part because the mythology wraps them up in such a way that you know it without even actually knowing it, right? But I'll give you an example of this. If you go pull up the stats for Wes Unseld, you are going to have all kinds of questions as to why in the world anybody has even heard of Wes Unseld. You go talk to your granddaddy about Wes Unseld and look what happens to his face. I'd also like to note one of the best stories in the history of the Joneses is my daddy saying, you know, your mama, she was into me. That made me feel pretty good about myself. Thought I must be some kind of good looking fella. Then I realized she felt the same way about Wes Unseld. And he just, he just took it all the way out the window. Like, unfortunately, that's what I think of. My daddy just hating on Wes Unseld, right? 'Cause my daddy's skinny like me. He out here like, what's the big deal about muscles, right? Like, I imagine that had to be what the case was when he get out here and talk about Wes Unseld. But if you did not watch Wes Unseld, I don't feel like there's any way for you to, like, really get an appreciation. Bill Russell, to be honest, is kind of like that. Where, you know, like, you hear about Bill Russell, but it's hard for people to imagine that Bill Russell was like jumping out the gym. You kind of needed to be there to capture it. And I think Isiah has become one of those people, in part because Isiah is just 6 feet tall, right? You ignore the fact that Isiah did not have a true superstar riding along with him in the ways that Magic and Bird did, right? Like Kevin McHale, I guess he may be another had to be there kind of case, but he was legitimately that dude. Isiah is a great all-time player. This documentary, I also felt like, does not give you a good enough understanding of how great of a player Isiah Thomas was, right? They went to back-to-back championships with the two best players on the team being Isiah Thomas and Joe Dumars, right? Isiah is that guy. Isiah matters in a very particular way, and nobody will ride for Isiah in public. Nobody does. Like, I would not even call myself a bit of an Isiah apologist. Like, I didn't grow up as the biggest Isiah Thomas fan as a basketball player. I know him a little bit through work. Like, I've, talked to him a few times, but like, I'm not, like, we had Vinny on here. Vinny, a little different situation. Vinny from Detroit. Vinny about to ride for Isiah. I'll tell you this one time, Gabe, I went out with my buddy Lester Spence. I think Lester works at Johns Hopkins now. He's a political scientist. He's from Detroit. Okay, so again, this is a political scientist with a PhD from the University of Michigan. Works at Johns Hopkins. All right. So I'm in Raleigh, and I go with Lester. We go get something to eat, and I forget what I was talking about. I was talking about great players of some time. Like, I just can't remember exactly what it was. And we're walking, and I remember he had like this backwards cane go on in these shades, and we were just strolling, talking. And I said whatever I said about the basketball players, and he just looks at me and goes, "What about Isiah?" Right? Like, Isiah will be involved in this discussion. Whatever your discussion of greatness is, Detroit is here to make sure Isiah will be involved in this discussion. And what's interesting is that if Michael Jordan played for any other team in the league, Chicago would be talking about Isiah the exact same way, because he matters in Chicago in a very, very particular way, right? Like, Derrick Rose, if you know the way the people from Chicago of this like younger age feel about Derrick Rose, Isiah Thomas was Derrick Rose of this time for what he represented as a dude getting out of this, right? Going through what you got to go through growing up in Chicago. Isiah was that guy for that generation in the way that Derrick Rose is this guy. Now, I don't know if Isiah was ever as big a star as Derrick Rose was in like 2011 or in 2012. But I see the things that people say on the tweets about Isiah, what they had to say about this last episode. And I'm like, damn, Isiah don't get no respect from y'all. Because remember we were talking about Kobe, where I said one of the things about Kobe was that Kobe was on the wrong side of everybody's favorite player. But at least Kobe was people's favorite player, right? So he at least had this crew. Isiah's on the wrong side of Bird, the wrong side of Magic, the wrong side of Mike.
And also, too, one thing that's interesting is we were talking about before about how before the Bulls won that championship in the 91 season, how like, oh, a scoring guard could never lead their team to a championship. I was just thinking back when you were like laying it all out on Isiah. They won 2 titles, and Isiah was their best player, and he's only 6 foot.
And the thing was about Isiah, if you needed 35, Isiah could get you 35. Have you ever looked at what Isiah did in the 1988 finals against the Lakers? Isiah Thomas, in those games, he was a one-man, 25 points on that busted ankle in the third quarter against the Lakers in Game 6. If he's anybody else, we treat this in a completely different way. But in the Bulls story, he's absolutely a villain. That team is absolutely villainous. They are the team that the Bulls ultimately had to overcome. But I need people to be honest, right? Y'all don't give a damn that the Pistons didn't shake their hands. Like, that might have been a little whack in the time, and I understand the argument for saying that it was whack. Don't know, like, if you care about that 30 years later, what is your problem, right? Like, Mike might have some problem with it. Okay, cool. Isiah is absolutely right. Celtics walked off the floor on them in the middle of the game. Nobody cared. Nobody gave a damn about it. Were the Pistons being sore losers? Absolutely. They were admitting that they were being sore losers. They got blown out by a team and a bunch of dudes that they did not like, and they did not want to dignify them with a handshake or anything else. That seems pretty consistent with what they've said the whole time as this has gone. I just want to know who actually cares that much about it, right? Like, I remember when the Magic beat the Cavs in 2009 in the Eastern Conference Finals, and LeBron walked off the court, did not shake anybody's hand after it was over. It was seen as a Bush League move. We talked about it, but that ain't like a defining thing that happened in the career of LeBron James. The two things I think for most people who follow the NBA, they are defining Isiah Thomas by two things: walking off on Michael Jordan, and the reason why Isiah is defined by everything bad, the Larry Bird quote in 87. Rodman said if Larry Bird was black, he'd just be another good player in the NBA, which everybody acknowledges is one of the dumbest things anybody could ever say, right? They then bring it to Isiah. Isiah laughs when he hears it and says, yeah, but I'm going to just say it. I agree with Rodman. He's totally wrong, right? Like, this is 100% incorrect. But woo, white people took that so personally. How dare anybody in this world ever form their lips to say that maybe, just maybe, a white person has been overrated on the basis of being white. It happens in this case that these guys went too far with it, but people act as though he said something that is actually not in line with historical precedent, right? But that's the thing that has defined Isiah, and at every turn, he never made all league again. He never made all NBA again after 1987. We'll talk about this more next week. It kept him off the dream team. That ain't have none. I don't think that had nearly as much to do with Michael Jordan as it had to do with Isiah said that. People could, I don't know if you realize this, Gabe, after Isiah said that, they flew him in to do the pregame show of the 1987 finals, like days after the fact that it happened. He had to do a press conference, and props to Larry Bird, by the way, for doing this. He did a press conference with Larry Bird where they said that everything was okay. Like, that's how big a deal that statement was. And I firmly believe how big a deal that statement continues to be all the way down the line. And this is what he has to answer for, right? So when this stuff comes up with the Pistons and the Bulls, now, of course, the Jordan documentary that Michael Jordan produces is not going to give you like a balanced portrayal of what the rivalry was. It is positioned as the Pistons were beating up on them, and the Bulls, well, we stood up to them, though, right? Nah. Everybody's got some roles in a lot of the things that happened in that series. But the Pistons as villains, you cannot evaluate it outside of the context of what Isiah Thomas said after Game 7 of the 1987 NBA Finals. Now, let me take this another step further. This is a great what if for basketball fans. So, Gabe, you're familiar with the Bird steals the ball play, right?
Refresh my memory.
It's either game 6 or 7 of the 87 East Finals, Pistons, Celtics. Isiah's inbounding the ball. It's right at the end of the game. All they got to do is get the ball in, and it's
under the baseline.
Right. Bird stole it, got it to Dennis Johnson, made shot. If Isiah just gets the ball inbounds at that moment, how much changes? In fact, I think that was game 5. But if he gets the ball in there, Pistons probably win that series in 6. There is no, the Dennis Rodman quote. That doesn't happen, right? That moment doesn't come up if Isiah just gets the ball in. That's how thin the margins are. If he just gets the ball in.
Now, how much of that reflected on Rodman? Because you talk about how much of it reflected on Isiah. Some of that is conscious. A lot of that is subconscious, right?
None. Rodman has never taken a single bit of it. But Rodman's always had this backstory. Also, man, Rodman one of these cats that think the white man's ice is colder, right? Like, if you go back and watch that documentary, the Dennis Rodman 30 for 30 that came out, go find the black people that he feels have positively contributed to his life in that documentary after the Bad Boy Pistons, right? Or anybody outside of the NBA roster that Dennis Rodman holds who is black in some regard. They're none. You won't find that. Right? It's not there. Isiah, on the other hand, is a little bit of a different situation. Like, Isiah was always a strong, like, labor guy for the NBA, like for the players, right? Like, Isiah is, you know, I'll use these in terms that people understand to describe what I'm talking about here. And yes, I'm aware of how this quote unquote sounds. That's part of why I'm saying it. Very articulate man. You know what I mean? Like, Isiah put that suit on, go handle that business, all of those things. But what side Isiah's on a lot of things has always been very, very clear, you know? And that's something that people don't like also, right? But you just have everybody tell you that Isiah is just this detestable sort of figure. And I mean, he got some things to answer for, right? Everybody's got some things that ultimately they have to answer for. So I'm not even going to pretend like he's just some dude that everything about this is right. Isiah's right. Nah, but Isiah's not wrong about everything. Isiah's been done wrong by some people. But I really think if he doesn't say that thing about Larry Bird, everything else goes away. Everything else is fine if he just doesn't do that.
Do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share on Dennis Rodman and the way that he was portrayed and kind of the way that the Vegas 48 hours in Vegas vacation thing was portrayed and his battles with mental health and how that was portrayed?
I think that's a little tricky for the film because we had just gotten 2 hours on Dennis Rodman not that long ago, right? And so we just kind of drop in to give you this introduction into who Dennis Rodman was, and that's hard to do like very quickly. Like that stuff. But it also becomes interesting because Dennis Rodman becomes the lens through which you view the Pistons because he's the connective tissue between the two teams. And that's a strange lens to view that team through. Like he's not the guy, like his story is not the one to tell the story, for the Pistons. I did see though, where Jason Hare, the director, corrected the record on this because it was misunderstood. It sounded like he took the 48 hours in Vegas and then Jordan had to go to Vegas and get him. And no, he did his 48 hours in Vegas. He came back and then he was just posted up at his crib across the street from the United Center. And that's where he wasn't coming to work. And that's where Mike went and dragged him out of the apartment. And the director says that Jordan said that he dragged him by the nose ring. Like that's where Mike had enough. He's like, it's across the street. Oh, hell no. We've got business to handle here. But no, I mean, I thought they did all right by Dennis. I felt their portrayal of Dennis was fair. I think that would probably be the best way to put it.
You were telling people on Twitter about how Artest asked for a similar vacation.
Oh, yeah. Artest. Yeah, this was the year of the brawl. This really happened. Ron Artest once asked for time off so that he could promote his album. Yes, his album. Like, not even somebody else. You remember after the brawl, he was promoting an Allure album. And so people would try to have him on like the Today Show to talk about the brawl, and he's trying to sell the album. But Rod asked for some time off so that he could go promote his album. And I did not realize that there was a precedent for going to an NBA team and just being like, yo, can I get a couple days off? I didn't know that was possible.
Yeah, because the equivalent of that nowadays is load management, right?
Yeah. They still make you sit on the bench. Right? Like they still make you come to the games. This dude was like, yo, I need to blow this pop stand. Cause when you think about it, I guess the argument is since you get like all those months off at the end, it's no big deal, right? But like even teachers take a day off every now and then and they ain't got to work all summer.
There's a difference also too between load management and taking what some people describe as like a mental health day just for myself to kind of like clear my headspace.
Yes.
You don't see that really happen that often. It's interesting now, like with mental health being such a bigger part of the conversation with players like DeMar DeRozan and Kevin Love. You wonder when that's going to start being a thing.
But the thing is, they can get them, right? Like, if it comes down to it now in this day and age, you can't. Then Kyrie kind of take a day off after Kobe died or something like that. Like you can pull that off now. But back then, coach, I need a break. What?
I need a vacation to Vegas.
Yes. I just need to go blow this. But, and I forget who I saw mention this, and I worry about like being too flippant about it, but there's something about these stories about addicts and this inexhaustible reservoir of energy that they have every now and then. Like, is it appropriate to laugh? Dennis Rodman seems to be that guy. Like, all y'all laying out on the ground, Dennis Rodman at work at 8:00 in the morning.
Running like a damn gazelle out there.
Right.
Like, the hangover does not exist for Rodman.
How is this possible? Like, he's the guy, you like the youngsters, yo, man, I don't need no young dudes hanging out with Dennis Rodman, except I feel like you should have a youngster hang out with Dennis Rodman, because not even the youngster would be able to hang. Like, the youngster would try it and learn. Like, nah, bro, I need to focus on my craft. All right, we'll be back in a minute with Brian Koppelman, but first, you've heard us talk about hymns and how they're helping guys look their best. If you haven't yet, it's time to see what they're all about. 66% of men lose their hair by age 35, and that is a big problem. Why do guys sit there and do nothing about it when they can turn to medicine and science? Once you've noticed thinning hair, it can be too late. Best way to prevent more hair loss is to do something about it while you still have some. It's time to grab the new year by the follicles. Here's to a year of personal growth. It's time to write a new chapter, one in which you have hair. The only solution is for Hims.com. It's a one-stop shop for hair loss, skincare, and other wellness supplements for men. Hims is helping guys be the best version of themselves with licensed physicians and FDA-approved products to help treat hair loss. Prescription solutions backed by science. Hims was created by a guy who knows some men's health conversations are easier online than in person. So no more awkward in-person doctor's visits or long pharmacy lines. For Hims connects you to real doctors online. Saves you hours, completely confidential and discreet. Answer a few questions, doctor will review, and if they determine it's right for you, can prescribe you medication to treat hair loss that is shipped directly to your door. Now, right now, my listeners can get started with their first month free. Go to forhims.com/Bomani. That's forhims.com/Bomani. Prescription requires an online consultation with a physician who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Offer valid if prescribed. 3-month minimum subscription. Additional restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information. Remember, that's forhims.com/Bomani. All right. It is that time of week where we have a guest joining us now. He is the co-creator of Billions, and to me, the funnest fact on his Wikipedia page, as the term goes, discoverer of Tracy Chapman. His name is Brian Koppelman. He's escaped New York City to quarantine.
I am a couple hours out of the city at a place that you have visited me, a place you have seen.
Oh, yes. You live the good life as you do it. How y'all holding up over there?
You know, we're doing all right, man. I mean, the last thing I could ever do is complain, right? The situation I'm in. You know, you and I talk frequently enough that we're aware of the fact that there are lots of ways that someone could have to do this quarantine. And if I look at the myriad ways one could do it, I have to say the way that I'm doing it is among the best possible. And so I can't be too upset about it. I feel very bad for the world right now. I feel very bad for, there are people who have food insecurity and rent insecurity and all that stuff. And I'm lucky enough right now that I don't. So we're hanging strong. We're doing okay.
I actually think that quarantining in the city is not as difficult as people think. When I talk to people in other places, they're like, oh my God, because they're hearing about, the news and the grave state of things here. But the one thing about being here is in other places, if you want to go take a walk, your city is not configured for you to do that. Your suburb is not configured for you to do that. And as much as you'll see the pictures on the internet of people at Central Park and stuff like that, by and large, everybody's taking this seriously. Everybody on the street walking around looking like ninjas with the masks on and everything else. Cause the threat is real serious here in a way that I find in a lot of places people still aren't believing.
The threat is really serious. I mean, that's what happened. The reason I left the city, we were shutting down production. We had a planned hiatus of a week on the show, and sort of around the beginning of that last week we were going to film before we took a week. We were supposed to take a week off, come back and shoot. And my friend Tim Ferriss, the great writer and podcaster, called me and he said, I'm looking at a bunch of modeling data. New York City is going to be a lot like Wuhan. You should get the out. And he said it with a level of seriousness. And I told a bunch of my friends then. I remember actually we got on the phone and you said, I got to do shows next week.
Yeah.
I can't leave. You were doing what you do. And I felt like until New York ramped up to where it is now, where yes, the city is okay, I really was concerned. And, I went on Twitter and I publicly talked about it and wanted to try to get people to take it seriously because I had been following it so closely. And then Tim, who I knew would have really excellent data, he kind of affirmed and confirmed what I was worried about. And so I do think like the 4 weeks kind of that I first got out of the city, there was a big advantage to not being in the city. Now I understand that it's probably relatively similar spots, probably easier to get groceries and stuff in the city than out of the city.
You and I have one privilege that I think is easy to lose sight of sometimes, which is the ability to call people who know stuff.
Yep.
Right? Like I was able to, because of, my graduate study in economics, a lot of my people did health econ and they're close with epidemiologists and stuff like that. And so I was able to get on the phone with people who knew some things that I personally trusted and was like, hey, so what's going on here? And to a man/woman, they were like, no, this is about to be real, man. This is about to be real.
Well, and I think it's a real strength of yours and of like our cohort of friends and associates that when the data says something, we do not look for some invisible force that's going to guarantee our protection from saying. We are ready to believe the synthesis of the data and react to it. And I wish more people understood that there are things call facts. And a model isn't just a guess. You know, people want to say, well, the modeler said 2 million. The modelers said, here are 3 scenarios. Here are 5 scenarios. Here are 7 scenarios. If we do X, Y, and Z, this is the range of options. But then, of course, that stuff gets reduced down in the way that most of the media talks about it. The truth is that the more you can take in and synthesize this information, the more chance you have to make an informed and good decision for you and your people. And that's what I'm trying to continue to do to the best of my ability. And I try to then broadcast that stuff on social media for the people who engage with me.
Yeah. Now, to somewhat trivial matters, but tangentially related to what we're talking about here, how does it go when you're shooting a television season and then the world starts crumbling in the middle of it?
It's disconcerting. And, you know, human beings learn to manage uncertainty. Uncertainty is a part of all of our lives. Mostly we manage it by turning the volume knob down on it, right? We all know there's some actuarial figure that accounts for some possibility that on any given day we could die, but we don't really focus on that very much. This kind of thing makes you focus on all that uncertainty. And so, yeah, as we started seeing this come down, we knew we were going to have to adjust in the way we were thinking about the season. We caught a good break in that episode, the last episode we completed of season 5 of Billions is episode 7. And it so happens that that episode has an ending that is a good ending to sort of take a pause if you're a viewer. And we were able to film that whole episode and edit it and mix it and do the music and the whole thing. So episode 7 will air, and then we'll have a pause as we gather to go back to production at some point and finish out the season. And we've written the end of the season. So we understand where it's going. And this is a fair and fine sort of midpoint. But man, you know, our crew, these people who work so hard and these incredibly long hours, and, you know, you're just, if you're in my and David Levine, who's my creative partner and business partner and lifelong best friend, he and I are constantly thinking about what this does, the ramifications beyond our creative ramifications, but the ramifications to the lives of everyone working on it. And man, you just wish this didn't have to happen.
You know, and I think the ending of last season of Billions, just the way it went, where it was interesting because I was going through episode after episode. It was a whole bunch of, you gotta be kidding me. I'm like, these people can't be this stupid, right? We've written largely smart people here. Chuck can't be this dumb. Like, what are you talking about? And then it ties up so neatly in the last episode in a way that I did not see coming. And I was like, oh, Brian, okay, I see what you're doing. I was in this uncomfortable place where I was afraid I was going to have to be dishonest with my friend about how I thought the season was going. And then the last episode came and I was like, okay, nailed it. Absolutely. Thanks, brought it all the way back around. And I'm like, yes, okay, I am here. This is it. And now we go into season 5, right? And one thing I'm curious about, in terms of the way that this whole notion of the show, right? It is obscene wealth and looking at how the obscenely wealthy comport themselves. You know, and there's a certain charm to different characters who are involved in it. But now I think, especially with the way this whole Corona thing is gone, I'll be curious to know how people feel about these obscenely wealthy people, as a lot of them right now more than ever feel like, yo, these people are the problem.
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, right? Look, the whole time, Bo, it's been a fascinating question to us, how people respond to Bobby Axelrod, his world, how people respond to Chuck, his world, how they respond to Taylor, Wendy. Like, you know, years from now, maybe David and I will talk about how we actually feel about these people. Instead, you know, we just draw them as we see them and let the people decide. I will say there have been times I've been surprised by how much rhythm we all want to give these characters. And I don't know if it has to do with our sense of aspiration. I don't know if it has to do with our just fascination with the way they can live. I also think, though, and this holds true in the world of sport, right, as we're watching Michael Jordan, there's something about excellence and people who work incredibly hard to be incredibly great at what they do that remains something in the American ethos, responds to that, even if it means that while engaging in that pursuit of excellence, there are character questions that surface. There is a lack of empathy on the part of the person prosecuting this agenda. We tend to allow a lot of leniency in a way in that spot. And my own suspicion is that's going to continue, Bomani, even through this situation in which we find ourselves.
Yeah, like I think what you describe is, I remember when I was a teenager, the parents were like, hey, think you might want to see a therapist? I was like, okay, sounds like a decent enough idea. So I remember I sat down with the therapist the first time, and what she told me to do was, she was like, you ever seen Amadeus? I was like, no, I have not seen Amadeus. She's like, you ought to go see Amadeus. But the whole question within Amadeus is really about the level of indulgence afforded to brilliance and genius, right? Like if you have this person who can do this excellent thing, because that's the thing about, the whole Mozart character just completely acts a fool, and people kind of got to swallow it because it is, in fact, Mozart, right? There is absolutely that tendency because people are attracted to brilliance. People are attracted to excellence.
Yeah, I would even use the word genius. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. And the questions that it asks about the price of genius too, though, and about the duality that can exist inside of genius, and about who's threatened by genius. Why are they threatened? I mean, this is something you don't like want to call yourself a genius, but Bo, this is something you've dealt with your whole life, right? Which is the fact that you don't hide your formidable intellect. You don't hide your gifts. You don't suffer fools that well at times, right? You can judge someone in a way by how they receive that, process it, and react to it. And I do think that when I look at the characters on the show, these are hyper intelligent people who are unwilling to tone down who they're now. They will play the fool in order to win at the end, which is what you're talking about that happened at the end of last season. But they will do that because they know the victory dance is going to be worth it.
And see, what I think is interesting about the billionaire in this context, right? Because so with Mozart, I mean, we've got, centuries and all this time, subsequent to when he, to his time, where there's a benefit to the world of the music. Even with Jordan, right? I think that people would say in the end that what he did provided something for others. Right now, we got this pandemic out here in these streets, and these billionaires can't do a damn thing for us. Like it would be great if somehow you had coincidentally thrown in like a hospital owner in this particular season, and then we could see how that how that sort of thing goes.
Yeah, I will say if you're listening to this and you haven't watched that movie, and it sounds like the subject matter isn't interesting to you, there's a character in it who's one of the most amazing villains, and he's like, if you watch the Jordan, he's Jerry Krause is Salieri.
Yeah.
Because it's also about courtiers, what it is to be a courtier, and, have to serve a king and make yourself look like the valuable person in the court and make other people in the court look disloyal or make other people in the court look. Now, we could argue about who the courtiers really were there, right? There's some articles now that are ragging on Phil and some articles ragging on, But if you look at it, that was a situation where there were a lot of people trying to curry favor to a few different kings. And people who are jealous of Michael and jealous of Phil as well. I love the documentary for the questions that it raised.
And it's funny because I recall viewing Salieri as almost a bit of a sympathetic figure in that, because he's the one who had to put up with Mozart, right? And I feel like Krause, just because of the way he's been presented, he's almost impossibly become a sympathetic figure to me in this, right? Because the one thing that nobody talks about is every single thing Krause thought that they should do was right. Every single move that he was proposing that people hated, and all the ones that he proposed that Mike hated, as the readers of the Jordan Rules can tell you, they all made sense.
But he didn't draft Jordan. He constantly wanted to say that it wasn't Michael's doing. And how can you say it was right to get rid of Phil, who went on and won championship after championship?
Now, that's the one that I think is questionable, but I think that the macro level idea, we need to start over again. I do think that he was right about that one. But like you think about this. No, I think he was right about the run being over. Scottie Pippen was finished. And since Scottie was finished, I don't know how they were going to put that thing back together. Like trying to find something to get for Scottie and sell high on that was the move to make. Like I think that Krause is correct on
But it turned out not to be. We don't have to live in results, but how do you not say to Phil Jackson, all right, here's $13 million. Stay for another year. You know what? When this run ends, Phil, then your time is done, but let's keep running.
Well, what if you felt like Phil lied to you about who the sources of the Jordan Rules were, and it led to you firing somebody who shouldn't have been fired?
I would say, please go win me another championship, sir.
I think there's more nuance, and like after I watched this and I was like, you know what I'd actually like to watch? a 30-minute documentary on Jerry Krause, or like a real deep sort of exploration. Because the part that I found fascinating about Krause is I knew that he was chubby. I didn't know he was 5'5". And so like when they have some of those pictures of him at practice and he just looks so completely out of place and nobody wants to give him any credit because Michael Jordan is present. And this dude from Arkansas that you went and found in some little bitty gym, he hates you too, right? Because Michael hates you. And so everybody around here hates you. And you actually, look, you put together a team around a scoring champion, and no scoring champion had ever won a championship prior to this. And nobody cares, man. Nobody cares. And I imagine that has to be really painful.
Yeah, but he didn't draft Jordan.
He didn't.
So he didn't win that. I do not give him credit.
Here's the thing, though. He did not draft Jordan, but we give Pat Riley credit for building something around LeBron James, right? He didn't draft him. He went and signed LeBron James, and everybody knew LeBron James is somebody that you should sign, for example.
No, that's totally different. You're making my argument for me. Pat Riley went and found that piece and brought it in. Jerry Krause had nothing to do with the central piece of Pat Riley. The whole world, think of it this way. The whole world wanted LeBron James, and Pat Riley found a way to get him. Through Dwayne Wade. And I'm not a big Pat Riley left the Knicks, broke my heart, right? When I look at politics within a corporate culture, any corporate culture, I'm always going to look for the guy who's sort of sitting in a glorified middle management position, angling for the top spot, who's trying to grab a bunch of credit up. Now you have to, you're in show business. You understand the way that people play off other people, the way people will tell talent one thing and tell the higher up something else. And so to me, when I try to just transfer who Jerry Krause would be in our industry, I cannot think anything but that I revile that guy and how he positions himself. My sympathies are always going to be with the coach and the players, the people who put themselves on the line.
Right. Now, I'll say this, and I am generally in the camp with you on that. Now, where I would disagree with you on Riley, you're right. Riley got LeBron, though I think LeBron made, as we've learned in LeBron's free agency moves, he decides where he's going. But Riley didn't find LeBron, right? Like, getting LeBron is one thing. If he had found him, then maybe I would look at it a little bit differently. But I think that people found that once he got LeBron and Bosh to go with Wade, that how to build the team around it that could win a championship was not nearly as simple as people thought it was in the first place. Because those Heat teams were often, out of those 4 years, there were 2 years where they were the best team in the league, but it wasn't just head and shoulders best team in the league, right? Like, they weren't there because building around LeBron was harder than it looked. And that's where I think for Krause, it does get to be true. Hey, Krause hired Phil Jackson, right? So we can say he didn't draft Mike. He hired Phil Jackson.
Well, look, what it seems to me from what I've read and watched, and I didn't know Jerry Krause, but then it seems to me that he allowed his ego to not think about what was really best for the squad, but instead to think about what was best for Jerry Krause, which was he wanted credit. He didn't want Phil to get the credit. Of course, if he'd made the moves he'd made and acted like a gentleman, then we would all have a different opinion of him, I think.
I also think he's taken a lot of Jerry Reinsdorf's bullets, one of the cheapest owners in pro sports, and that part never comes up at all. Now, what seems to be clear to me about this documentary is that Mike has decided that there's some people that we're not going to say nothing bad about, right? Reinsdorf is very looked out for in the course of this. Krause is not. Doug Collins, very looked out for in the course of this. You know, like Mike made the calls of who's going to look good in this. And the call was made, like, at some point, and I've watched 8 episodes of this, I don't think at any point it ever comes around and people say, well, you got to give Jerry credit for ... Nope. None of that. He's just, you know what? I'm trying to think of one of these movies where they create an evil person and everything, like The Hurricane, right? Where they created that cop who didn't really exist and he just became the representation of evil. And Jerry Krause is the man.
Dan Hedaya played that character in Hurricane, who you also know from he's in Usual Suspects. But yeah, right.
And so Jerry Krause is the walking representation of the man, even though the actual man is still alive and they got interviews with him and he ain't got to answer for nothing.
I also want to point out, as great as The Last Dance is, there are commercials in it, so you can tape The Last Dance and watch Billions in its time slot at 9:00 on Sunday night. Now, you can watch Billions if you want, starting at midnight Saturday night. Billions is going to be up, the first episode on Showtime anytime, on demand. So you can watch it ahead of time and then watch Last Dance at 9. But I think what you should do is tape Last Dance, watch Billions at 9, and then roll into Last Dance, because then you can watch it without commercials.
Yo, it is actually very interesting that your show and Insecure both have the same thing, where The Last Dance, not that this is going to dictate, like, The Last Dance is not going to dictate when you guys aired, but The Last Dance is supposed to run in June. It was going to be great, right? Insecure was going to run at 10. I'd be able to knock that season out before that came around. I was going to be able to knock y'all season out before that came around. Nah. We need something over here. And here we are.
Well, yeah, but luckily you've watched so much of The Last Dance that you don't have to watch it in real time, and you can watch my show.
That is correct. I can't wait to see what happens here, man. Like, this is, because, I am Taylor Mason gang all the way. That is my single favorite character. The only, like, across the board likable one. Actually, no, I do like the Mafi guy also. And the two of them, same squad. I like that. I appreciate that.
It's a strong squad. The Taylor Mason Capital squad is a strong squad.
In fact, I like all of them. And her assistant. Well, I don't know. She's not the assistant. I don't even know how to describe the woman. You know who I'm talking about.
Oh, you're talking about the character of Lauren, played by Jade Estheet. She's fantastic. Yes, she's great.
Yes. Like all of that. I'm over there for that team. I'm rooting for them stronger than anybody.
Plenty of them on the show. You'll dig what they're up to this season for sure.
Now, I wonder this because you said, you guys don't really, we'll talk about this maybe when it's over, but I am kind of curious about this. Like, as you write a show like this and you have the characters and as they evolve year after year after year, like, what affections do you or don't you develop toward characters? Like, David Simon legendarily will kill anybody off. You can't fall in love with your characters, but it feels impossible not to.
We're pretty ruthless about what would happen to these characters, meaning if we think a character would act in a certain way, we're going to allow that character to act in that way. We do love all these characters, though. When you write them and you're inside their heads, I mean, these characters basically exist somewhere in the imaginations of David and me and then the actors who play them. And there's no way to have them speak this dialogue and think the way that they'd think without understanding why they think the way they think, without having empathy for the position they're in. When you're writing that character's voice. Now, obviously we understand the superstructure of the thing and we understand who they are and how they fit into the world. And we understand the deep flaws that they have as human beings. But that doesn't, but alongside that, we have, of course, a tremendous amount of understanding, which leads to some affection for them. I'm never going to give any spoilers out about what happens to anybody, but I'll say we are willing to do what we have to do to serve the show.
Yeah, like I just think that as if I were doing something like this, like I remember once we were doing a big Wire rewatch online and all the people that played the various characters come up. And of course with actors, it's going to be a little bit different. But I think I was going back and forth with the dude who played Naaman Bryce, who was, roundly considered a sucker in Wire viewing circles. But the dude that was playing Naaman Bryce, you would have thought that he thought that we was calling him a sucker. Like his level of defense for Naaman was off the charts. And I'm like, nah, man, he's a sucker. Everybody knows that he is a sucker. And, when you have these characters come up, I just imagine that there's got to be, I like this a little bit more than that one. Not even necessarily that it dictates the plot, but I imagine that's an interesting emotional experience dictating the course of these people you create.
These actors have to be able to advocate in their minds for the character they're playing because they have to understand the motivations. So they have to understand why, like, if you're a Shakespearean actor playing Richard III, you have to understand why Richard III thinks he can do the things that he does, and if you're writing these characters, you have to do the same thing. The other thing is, man, these actors are so great. They bring so much life to the characters that you also love them. This is an amazing thing that I get to do for a living, getting to like live in my imagination, work with my lifelong closest friend, and have these just unbelievable actors show up to sort of really breathe life into it. So yeah, of course you kind of fall in love a little bit.
So like with this season, when you start writing a season like this, do you know where you want it to go, right? Or is it just kind of a matter of like, I feel like there's a story for those episodes that we're going to carry out. But like when you start, do you know where you want it to end? That's
like the moment of breakthrough that happens at the beginning of every season. So yeah, David and I will go off and our other writers in between seasons. And you want to just kind of be playing, like doing things, not just sitting there grinding, thinking about the show. What you want to have happen is that your subconscious mind is working, right? So when you start then, okay, now it's last season, I think we started the writer's room July 5th or something. So, hey, it's July 5th. What are we thinking about? And you start talking about this stuff, thinking about it, and suddenly you throw an idea and conversation happens. And then the next morning you'll be journaling or meditating or David. And it's like, that's where this has to go. That's where these people, and then once you kind of know, once Dave and I know, here's the end. Here's what the end is going to look like, which happened. We understood. Once you kind of understand that, then the rest of it starts to fall into place. The rest of it starts to lock in from there.
All right. Where's the music in that chain?
Oh, yeah. The music is heavy in that whole thing, right? Sometimes the music and a scene show up at the exact same time. Sometimes we're all year long, I'm making song lists. Dave's doing it too, but all year long, we're thinking about it. If I hear a song and something in it resonates with something about one of the characters or a situation, it's going on my playlist. And then I'll start reviewing that playlist and thinking about it. Plus, like you know, I've had a lot of talks about music, right? I've spent a lifetime not even consciously getting ready to pick music for this stuff, but I spent a lifetime obsessing about music. Obsessing as you do about who played bass on that track, who, who's the drummer, who mixed it. So that these songs are very alive to me and very real things, and where they kind of, how they live matters, so that when I'm there writing us and I suddenly a song idea will show up, I'll text Dave and I'll go, hey, or listen to this track, or he'll text me, or we'll be going, we're just constantly thinking about the way in which the songs play in. Like 4 songs in the first episode of the season. Sorry, 5 songs, and 3 of them are the original record, and 2 of them are kind of played within the thing in a different way. But the 3 records that play are really significant for a variety of reasons. What you want is that someone who's just watching the show, the moment's playing, and they're just digging what's happening on screen. And they don't have to know who's singing the song or what the song means, or it just hits them as an experience, right? Like we all have watching movies and TV. But what you hope is for the people who care about this stuff or get it on the meta level, it'll also land on the meta level. You want it to have that thing where it just all kind of makes sense together as separate factors, and then also as the gestalt of it, like the whole.
Yeah, like I think a mistake that people often make with stuff like that is trying to get something they think that quote unquote everybody can get or everybody will recognize, which is irrelevant. And I know it doesn't matter that much. You know why? Because I'm a black person that watch a bunch of stuff, right? Like no one's ever thinking about, well, do the black people get this reference? No, that's never it, right? I pick up on whatever it is. And like to me, the best use of music and on screen that I can recall, if you ever ask me off the top of my head, it's easy money. Malcolm X, Spike Lee using Change Gonna Come for for those 4 minutes of stretch, which by the way must have cost a fortune to get Alan Klein to sign off on the full 4 minutes. But I had never heard the song before then. It didn't matter if I knew it, right? It hit, it went, you were able to consume it in the time period. And that's one thing I dig is that when it's not so quite on the nose, right? You can't get a strike in bowling hitting it straight down the middle. It can't be right down.
What's the Sam Cooke song at the beginning of Ali? Sam Cooke singing, because Malcolm's also in it.
Yeah, I think it's Bring It On Home to Me.
And it's like done in the version sort of from Live at the Harlem Square Club.
That's Bring It On Home.
Right? It's Live at the Harlem Square Club, and he's singing when all that stuff is Mario Van Peebles is X and that. So they also used Sam Cooke as a way to do that, which was fascinating.
Yeah, and then that's right. The flaw that Ali had was as too on the nose is after Malcolm gets killed. That's when they bring the other song
into
it. And that's where it's like, oh no, Bring It On Home to Me. Every single version of that I have ever heard is incredible. Like that is the most monstrous, like you cannot get this wrong in any way whatsoever.
I remember when I first got Live at the Harlem Square Club in the 80s, early 80s. And it was actually the first time I'd ever read the liner notes in that record. The vinyl was the first time I'd ever understood, because, I was born in 66. So in 80, I was 14 or 15, and I bet you that record came out 82 or 83 or something. I haven't looked, but I remember reading it as a 15 or 16-year-old and understanding that Sam had to have, they didn't use an expression like code shifting or anything like that then, but that Sam Cooke had to perform differently for different audiences. I had no awareness of that. As a suburban white kid, I didn't understand that the You Send Me Sam Cooke was entirely different from the Sam Cooke who would perform on that particular circuit for what he thought of as his own people. And I remember listening to that album and the way that he sang and understanding, oh yeah, this guy's the greatest singer who ever lived, because he can do Perry Como and he could sing harder than Rod Stewart, and it was like mind blowing to me. Now, you probably came up and that record was always just part of it, but that record very specifically came out much later than in its time.
Yeah, no, I really got into Sam around in college, and you realize that the Sam catalog is like the James Brown catalog in a lot of ways, where there are two wings to it, right? Rihanna is doing that in present time also. Rihanna's got all these hits on like the dance circuit and everything else that are not the songs that are played on black radio, right? And so with Sam, I had not realized until recently, it was the first time I really dug into the Harlem Square Club record, and you hear it and you're like, oh, okay. Then you read a little more and you're like, oh no, they didn't release this while he was alive for an express reason, right? And it was because this was too hard.
I'm looking it up right now, man. So 85, right? So it was recorded in 63 and didn't come out until 85. And I remember 85. So I'm, 18, about to turn 19 or something like that. And they'd shelved that record for 22 years, even though it was the kind of definitive showcase for what Sam Cooke did. And it is, it's fascinating. I mean, you and I could talk about it. I always said we should do a music podcast, the two of us.
And I say, we're getting close. I ain't doing nothing else. Although I keep saying that, then I pick up more projects. The music part on the Jordan doc has been interesting too. The music supervision on this, apparently it's the same dude. By the way, in case you're curious, you'd be like, yo, these songs are so perfect for this documentary. It's a gentleman named Rudy Chang. And I have given him a lot of credit through this because he never went right on the nose on these, right? Like the I Ain't No Joke was a perfect choice. The I'm Bad for the 86 stuff, he's typically right in line with the times. There's only been one thing that I found has not been from the same time as the moment. But man, I was like, you have nailed this.
Yeah, it's funny. I haven't paid as close attention. I've only watched the 4 episodes. And yeah, the music's been in the pocket. None of it made me go and listen to records, but still.
Yes.
When something's really nails me, I'll then go and have to go down a deep sort of hole of going through all of it. And that didn't, mostly because watching it is such a memory play. It's just, I'm so back there. I was at so many Knicks games. Jordan was so large. That team was so large in our imaginations that this thing has really done it to me.
Yeah, I think it's hard to explain to people like the largesse of Michael Jordan. I think the documentary is doing a good job of this because, look, I am of the age of LeBron. I've been around for the big moments. I've been in the tunnel when he walks past. It's still in Jordan, right?
Nope.
Like it's not, I don't know if it's possible for anybody to be a star in this day in the way that Jordan was a star in 1992.
There's only one Frank Sinatra.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's only one Michael Jordan.
And he is very much so like Frank Sinatra, I think.
Yeah. It is, man. Think about the way he's sitting there and smoking a cigar and sort of the way he can nod at somebody and change their lives. I mean, Jim, I had never heard the Paxson story told exact. I've read it and everything, but the fact that Paxson was such a great shooter and it took until that moment and that game, it wasn't even Phil saying it. It was that Paxson hit that first shot that he got that made Michael finally be like, okay, fine. And then Michael changed and obviously treated Kerr that way and all that stuff. But I mean, that was an incredible moment to me.
Right. As if John Paxson isn't an NBA player, right? As if he could not make that shot, he would be allowed in the facility.
Yes, exactly.
Like that for John Paxson, he didn't have the key card to get in. They were like, yo, go make an open 17-footer. That's how we know if it's you.
No, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I always wonder how it is for Knicks fans because it's interesting that Jordan has broken Knicks fans' hearts so many times, but I never feel like Knicks fans hate Jordan.
Love him.
Right? Like I never feel animus.
No, we hated Scotty. We hated Larry. There were lots of guys we hated. And look, lots of Knicks fans would shout down Jordan. But I will tell you, I went to the double nickel game, which you probably saw that already, but I haven't covered the double nickel game. I haven't gotten to that episode yet. I went with my friend Gary Harris, and I'll never, ever forget what it felt like when he made the first shot of that game. And then we realized what was happening. The Garden cheered for him the way it cheered for Muhammad Ali, the way it cheered for Bruno Sammartino, the way it cheered for Billy Joel or Bruce Springsteen. Like the Garden cheered for Michael Jordan that night because he was giving us back this gift. And, I see similarities in, I'll say, If I look at my show, the way that Jordan exerts influence on people, on the whole world, the way he bends the world to his will is really something that we explore on the show, right? I mean, these are all characters who try to use their special skills to bend the world to their will.
And this, I think, in part, as we talk about, is the attraction of brilliance.
Yes.
People, I think, have a universal appreciation for brilliance. And in the midst of it, they will do whatever it takes to continue the brilliance.
Yeah, they have to. They feel compelled to.
Yeah, like we have decided that there's a level of indulgence that we will afford to the brilliant.
But it's twinned with jealousy, because that's the other part of Amadeus, is that Salieri is incapable of the genius. He can recognize it. And so he has to try to, when he gets the opportunity to cut it down, he's going to cut it down, because he can't make himself a better human being, a human being who's able to get to the other side of it and recognize that genius like that should purely be celebrated. And I'm on the side that says those things are so rare that when they show up, we should water them, get them plenty of sun, and help them grow.
I need to get you to work where I work. You can dump some water on me. You know what I'm saying? That's what I need. Every time I go somewhere in public, I would get somebody, that's going to be my new thing. Dump some water on me. Water me. Watch me grow. That's what I need. Like that's a whole nother level of like the Bundini Brown, right? Get somebody to come pour some water on you.
You and Amadeus do have certain similarities of self-regard, it turns out.
The thing I always remember watching at Amadeus, because I think the point that the therapist was trying to make, and like I guess as a proxy for my parents, which I think was correct, which was, you really want to be out here acting a fool like this? Like, is this who you want to be? Is this the kind of person that you want to be? And so as a result, I have like such minimal patience for people who behave as Mozart did while also fully understanding that that's the gang.
Like, okay, did it bother you when Prince behaved like that?
I'm able to acknowledge it as what it is, and as an adult have come to understand that these are the trades that you wind up getting. Now, where I get bothered is obviously when people act like this and they ain't no goddamn Prince.
Right. Yes, that's correct. If you're Jordan Knight and you try to act that way, it's not okay.
Yeah. I'm not here for it. Like, nothing over self-indulgence. That is where you get me, where I'm like, well, why do you think you ain't got to show up on time? Right? Like, that's where I get thrown off.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All these people should comport themselves in a way with generosity of spirit and understanding that not everybody has their gifts. That absolutely should be the standard to which they have to live. But if the price of getting the art is that sometimes, not to harm anybody, right? There's lines. But if the price of getting the art is some petulance, I'll put up with the petulance.
Yeah, I'd say it just everybody winds up with a limit, right? Like where it just gets to a place where it's like, okay, I have had enough. And it's always interesting to see what that place is depending on who the person is, because the petulant person always tends to have one or two people that doesn't put up with that, and they appreciate the one or two people. But yes, the third gonna have to live with it.
That's right. That's exactly right.
All right. So we got Billions. Season is kicking off May 3rd at 9 p.m. Eastern. It sounds like you still really enjoy doing it.
I really do, Bo. I mean, you talk to me on the days that I'm tired from it and all the rest. Don't I always seem like I'm into doing it?
No, I can't tell the difference.
Right. I'm into it, man. What a incredible thing I get to do for a living. And I've done this for a really long time, and I've done it long enough that I actually super appreciate that this is the life that I get to live. It's kind of unlike those people. I don't fancy myself a genius at all. I just fancy myself someone who works really hard to get the most out of whatever talent that I have. And all I want to do is get to keep telling these stories at this high a level.
And one day, when all the world gets back to normal, we're going to go see Sturgill. I was really bummed out.
Me too. I've been listening to a lot of his music.
Dude, I'm all in. Sailor's Guide to Earth, that is the one that has gotten my full-on immersion. And not for the In Bloom cover, which I actually think is good, not great. The last 3 songs, though, on that, the All Around You, and the Oh Sarah, and I can never remember the name of the last one. The real rockin' one. Turn on the TV, turn on the news. I'm like, oh, okay, this is how you close out a record.
Dude, for me, the last record is when I hear Remember to Breathe, when I hear, basically to me, every single song on the latest record is better than the one that comes before. And I never spoil what songs are going to be on Billions, but I think you'll be happy
I'm here for it.
Somewhere in the season.
I greatly appreciate it. That is my man, Brian Koppelman. Sir, I greatly appreciate your time. Enjoy yourself in your undisclosed location.
Yes, Bomani, it's always great to talk to you. And I'm eager to hear your thoughts after the show airs Sunday night. So hit me with a text or a phone call. And thanks for beeping out my undisclosed location. Talk to you soon.
There we go, man. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us here on The Right Time. We do this thing a couple times a week. My man Gabe Bassane handles everything behind the scenes. Thank you, sir. And thanks to our sponsor, Hims. Remember, subscribe to The Right Time. Rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. You only give us 4 stars. I'm inclined to believe you are a hater. And we'll talk to you guys in a couple of days. Take it easy.
Thanks for checking out The Right Time with Bomani Jones podcast.
You can listen or subscribe on the ESPN app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
The Right Time
with Bomani Jones.